Welcome back to Her Secret Diaries, the place where quiet stories speak the loudest. If this is your first time here, this channel is where memories, hidden truths, and the little moments people often overlook finally find their voice. Today's story is about something simple, a voice message, but sometimes the smallest things carry the deepest meaning. This is the story of a grandmother who scheduled a voice message for the future, and the family who didn't understand why until the day it finally arrived. No one in the family knew that Grandma Eleanor had learned how to schedule messages on her phone. In fact, most of them believed she barely understood how to send a regular text whenever the grandchildren visited. They often joked about it. Grandma still writes messages like letters. Daniel once laughed. She even signs her texts. And it was true. Her messages always ended with something like, "Love, Grandma." But what they didn't realize was that Eleanor spent quiet afternoons learning small things on that little phone her granddaughter, Mia, had given her. Not because she loved technology, but because she was preparing. Eleanor was 78 years old and lived alone in the same small house she and her husband had bought 46 years earlier. The house still smelled faintly like cinnamon and old books. Every corner carried memories. Her husband Arthur had passed away 8 years ago, and since then the house had become quieter than she ever expected. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of echoes. The clink of Arthur's coffee cup, the sound of his shoes by the door, the low hum of his voice reading the newspaper out loud. Sometimes Eleanor would still turn toward the living room, expecting to see him sitting in his old chair, but the chair had been empty for a long time. Her children visited when they could. Her son David lived 2 hours away with his wife and 2 kids. Her daughter Rachel lived even farther across the country. Life had pulled everyone in different directions, and Eleanor understood that she never complained. Whenever someone called and apologized for being busy, she always answered the same way. "Oh, sweetheart, don't worry about me. I'm just happy you called." But there was something Eleanor had begun to notice during the last year. Something small, something quiet. Time was moving faster than she expected, not in the dramatic way movies showed it. There were no sudden tragedies, no dramatic hospital scenes, just little things. Walking up the stairs took longer. She sometimes forgot where she placed her glasses, and once she walked into the kitchen and couldn't remember why she had gone there. That moment stayed with her, not because she was afraid, but because she understood something clearly. Memories were fragile, and words that weren't said in time could disappear forever. One afternoon, Mia came to visit after school. Mia was 16, curious, patient, and the only person in the family who never laughed at Eleanor's questions about phones. Instead, she showed her everything slowly. That day, Eleanor asked something unusual. "Mia," she said softly, "can you schedule a voice message on this thing?" Mia looked surprised. "You mean like sending it later?" "Yes, why?" Eleanor smiled. "Oh, just curious." But Mia showed her anyway. She explained how to record a message and choose the exact date and time it would be sent. When Mia left that evening, Eleanor sat quietly at the kitchen table with her phone in her hands. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she pressed record. Her voice trembled at first. "Hello, my dear family?" She paused, then started again. "Hello, my dear family. If you're hearing this message, it means the day I scheduled it has finally arrived." She stopped the recording, listened to it, then deleted it. It wasn't right yet. The next morning she tried. Again and again the day after that. For almost 2 weeks Eleanor practiced speaking into that small phone, because she wasn't just leaving one message, she was leaving many. Each one scheduled for a different day in the future. Some were meant to arrive on birthdays, some on holidays, some on completely ordinary days. She spoke to each member of the family, like they were sitting across from her. For Mia, for Daniel, for her son David, for Rachel, even for little Oliver, who was only 6 and probably wouldn't understand the message until he was older. But Eleanor wasn't planning for today, she was planning for the future, because she had learned something important after Arthur died. When someone disappears from the world, their voice disappears with them. Photos remain, letters remain, but the sound of a person's voice slowly fades from memory. She didn't want that to happen, not completely. So she started recording. One message. Said Daniel, if you're hearing this on your birthday, I hope you're still chasing the things that make your heart feel alive. When you were little, you used to say you wanted to build airplanes. I don't know if you ever did, but I hope you never stopped dreaming. Another message said, Rachel, you always carried the weight of the world on your shoulders. One wish. I had told you more often that you were doing better than you thought. Another one was for David, double quotes, son, I know we didn't always agree, but you were the boy who used to hold my hand when crossing the street, even when you were 12 and thought no one was looking. And one message was just for Mia, the longest one. Because Mia was the only one who noticed the quiet things. Weeks passed. Eleanor scheduled more messages. Then one evening, she recorded a message that she didn't schedule. Instead, she saved it privately. It was meant for the day she believed would come sooner than the others. In that message, she said something very simple. I don't know when you'll hear this, but if you do, please remember something. The greatest regret people carry is not the mistakes they made, but the words they waited too long to say. 3 months later, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. The family gathered in the small house that suddenly felt far too quiet. The funeral was gentle, full of soft tears and long hugs. People shared stories about Eleanor's kindness, about her cinnamon cookies, about how she remembered everyone's birthdays. After the funeral, life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. David went back to work. Rachel flew home. The grandchildren returned to school, and Eleanor's phone was eventually placed in a small wooden drawer in her bedroom. No one thought about it much, until 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday afternoon when David's phone buzzed. He glanced at the notification. It was a voice message from Mom. For a moment he thought it was some kind of mistake. Then he pressed play. And suddenly Eleanor's voice filled the quiet room. Hello, my dear family. If you're hearing this message, it means the day I scheduled it has finally arrived. David froze. His hands started shaking. His wife looked at him with concern. What's wrong? But he couldn't answer, because Eleanor's voice continued. I hope you're all taking care of each other. And I hope the house still smells like cinnamon sometimes. By the time the message ended, David was crying harder than he had at the funeral. Because hearing her voice again felt like opening a door that had been closed forever. Later that evening, Rachel called him. Did you get it too? Yes. They both sat in silence for a moment. Then Rachel whispered something that none of them expected. I think Mom planned this, and she was right. 3 days later, another message arrived. This time on Mia's phone. Mia listened to it. Alone in her bedroom, Eleanor's voice sounded warm and calm. Mia, if you're hearing this message today, it means you're probably having one of those days where the world feels confusing. You always tried to understand people more than they understood themselves. Never lose that. Mia cried quietly while listening. But she also smiled, because it felt like her grandmother was sitting beside her again. Weeks passed, and every now and then, another message arrived. One on Oliver's birthday, one on Rachel's wedding anniversary, one on Christmas morning. Each message carried something small, a memory, a piece of advice, a joke. Sometimes, Eleanor even laughed in the recordings, and hearing that laughter made everyone pause for a moment, as if time itself had briefly folded in half. The messages didn't make the family sad forever. Something unexpected happened instead. They brought everyone closer together. David started calling Rachel more often. Mia began visiting the old house again. And Daniel once said something that surprised everyone. It feels like Grandma is still reminding us to stay connected. One evening, Mia finally opened the wooden drawer in Eleanor's bedroom. Inside was the phone, still charged, still holding dozens of scheduled messages waiting for the future. Mia realized something incredible. Grandma had planned years ahead. Messages for graduations, for birthdays. That hadn't happened yet. Even one scheduled 10 years later. And suddenly Mia understood the real reason behind all of it. Eleanor wasn't afraid of being forgotten. She simply didn't want love to arrive too late, so she sent it forward in time, one voice message at a time, and every time the phone buzzed somewhere in the family, Eleanor's voice returned, soft, warm, familiar, reminding them that love doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just waits quietly, until the moment someone needs to hear it most. The first few voice messages surprised the family, but after a while, they began to expect them in a strange, quiet way, not every day, not even every week, but every now and then. A phone somewhere in the family would buzz, and someone would see the name they never expected to see again. Grandma Eleanor. At first, every message made them cry. The sound of her voice was too familiar, too alive, too real. Too real. But slowly, something changed. Instead of feeling only grief, the messages began to feel like visits, small visits from someone who understood them better than anyone else. The next message arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. It went to Rachel. Rachel had just finished making coffee, and was standing by the kitchen window, when her phone vibrated on the counter. She almost ignored it. Work emails came in constantly. But when she looked down, the name stopped her breathing. Mom. For a moment, she couldn't move. Her hand hovered above the phone before she finally pressed play. Eleanor's voice filled the quiet kitchen. Rachel, sweetheart, if you're hearing this today, I hope you remembered to take a moment for yourself this week. Rachel slowly sat down at the table. Her eyes were already filling with tears. Your whole life you've been the one taking care of everyone else, Eleanor continued gently. But even the strongest people need rest. Rachel covered her mouth as she listened. Because that week had been one of the hardest she'd had in years. Work had been overwhelming. Her marriage had felt tense. She hadn't told anyone. And yet somehow, hearing her mother say those exact words felt like a hand resting on her shoulder. The message ended with something simple. You're doing better than you think. Love you always. Rachel sat there long after the recording finished. For the first time in days, she took a slow breath, and she whispered something into the empty room. Thank you, Mom. Across the country, Mia was discovering something else about the messages. They were not random, they were thoughtful, carefully timed, almost like Eleanor had studied the rhythm of the family's lives before scheduling them. One message arrived on the first day of Daniel's college semester. Another arrived on Oliver's first day of third grade. Each one felt perfectly placed, but Mia began to wonder how far into the future the messages actually went. So one afternoon she returned to Eleanor's house. The house had been left mostly untouched. David visited once a week to check on things, but Mia liked coming there alone. The quiet didn't scare her. In fact, it felt comforting. She walked through the living room slowly, touching the same furniture her grandmother had used every day. The same bookshelf, the same couch, the same small table where Eleanor used to write grocery lists. Then Mia went to the bedroom. The wooden drawer still held the phone. She opened it carefully and turned the phone on. The battery indicator lit up. Mia unlocked it, using the code Eleanor had once shown her. Inside the messaging app, Mia found the list of scheduled voice messages, and when she saw the number, she gasped quietly. There were dozens, some scheduled months ahead, some years ahead. The farthest one was scheduled nearly 12 years into the future. Mia felt a strange warmth in her chest. It was as if her grandmother had found a way to stretch her presence across time, to control it, not to haunt anyone, but simply to remain part of their lives. That evening, Mia showed the phone to her father. David stared at the screen in disbelief. She really planned all of this? He asked softly. Mia nodded. I think she wanted us to keep hearing her. David sat down slowly. For the first time since Eleanor's passing, he smiled. That sounds like your grandmother. Over the following months, the messages became part of the family's rhythm. They started sharing them with each other. Whenever someone received a new one, they sent it to the family group chat, and slowly, the group chat, which had once been full of short replies and missed messages, became active again. Rachel started sharing photos. Daniel sent jokes. Mia posted voice recordings of Oliver laughing. It felt like the family was slowly reconnecting, and in a quiet way, Eleanor was still bringing them together. Then something unexpected happened. One night Daniel received a message that wasn't scheduled for a birthday or holiday. It arrived on a random Wednesday. He played it while sitting in his dorm room. Eleanor's voice sounded softer in this one. Daniel, if you're hearing this message tonight, I want to tell you something important. Daniel leaned forward slightly. You're going to have moments in your life where you feel lost. Moments where you're not sure what path you're on, or if you're even going the right direction. Daniel stared at the phone. Because that exact week he had been considering dropping out of his engineering program. He hadn't told anyone yet. Whenever that feeling comes, Eleanor continued, remember that confusion is not failure. It's simply the mind asking questions. Daniel felt a tear roll down his cheek. Take your time, but don't give up on yourself too quickly. The message ended with Eleanor laughing softly. And eat properly. College students forget that part. Daniel sat quietly for a long time. Then he closed his laptop and went for a walk. For the first time in weeks, his thoughts felt calmer. Back at the old house, another discovery waited quietly. Mia had been exploring Eleanor's desk when she found a small notebook. Inside were handwritten pages filled with notes, not grocery lists, not reminders, but plans. Each page listed names. David, Rachel, Daniel, Mia, Oliver. Next to each name were small notes about their lives, important dates, dreams they once mentioned, things they struggled with. Mia realized something that made her eyes water. Grandma hadn't just scheduled random messages. She had carefully thought about what each person might need to hear. Sometimes encouragement, sometimes comfort, sometimes just a reminder that someone believed in them. It was like Eleanor had written emotional letters and sent them forward through time. Months turned into a year, and the messages kept arriving, constantly, but often enough that the family never forgot. Then came the message that changed everything. It arrived exactly 1 year after Eleanor's passing. All 5 family members received it at the same time. When they played it, Eleanor's voice sounded calm and thoughtful. My dear family, if you're hearing this message together today, it means 1 year has passed since I left the world you're living in. Everyone listened in silence. I hope you've taken care of each other. That was always my greatest wish. Then her tone became softer. But today, I want you to do something special. I want you to gather together. David looked at the others in disbelief, because that very evening they were already planning to meet at the old house. It had been Rachel's idea. Eleanor continued speaking. Go to the living room and look behind Arthur's old chair. The family members exchanged stunned glances, because none of them had ever looked there. Later that night they gathered in the living room. Slowly David moved Arthur's chair. Behind it was a small wooden box taped to the wall. No one spoke for a moment. Rachel carefully removed it. Inside were handwritten letters. One for each person, and one final envelope labeled, for the family. David opened it slowly. Inside was a single page written in Eleanor's careful handwriting. It said, some messages are meant for phones, others are meant for paper, but the most important ones should always be spoken face to face. David looked up at the others. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Mia broke the silence. Grandma tricked us into spending time together. Rachel laughed through tears. That sounds exactly like her. And for the first time in a long while, the old house filled with laughter again. Not the quiet kind, real laughter. The kind Eleanor always loved. Later that night, Mia checked the phone again. There were still many messages waiting in the future. Asterisk, birthdays, graduations, weddings. Even one labeled simply, for the day someone feels completely alone. Mia closed the phone gently, because she realized something beautiful. Grandma Eleanor hadn't just scheduled voice messages. She had created a bridge across time, a way to remind her family that love doesn't end when someone leaves. Sometimes love simply finds another way to speak, even if that voice arrives years later, through a small notification. from a grandmother who knew exactly what her family would need to hear.